So now I'm pleased to introduce Congressman Jared Huffman, a friend and tireless advocate for our communities. Jared is a member of the Committee on Natural Resources and the House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure. He is a champion for the environment in Washington, D.C., working under extremely difficult circumstances. In fact, I know he likes to get out of Washington, D.C. anytime he can, so we're loving having him here. He has kept his focus on accomplishing wins for us locally by figuring out where he can succeed and partner across the aisle. Most recently, he secured a 20-year leases for Point Reyes ranchers, allowing them to consider carbon sequestration projects. He has taken a strong stand on drilling off the shores of California, and he has worked locally to find solutions with federal interests such as the Muirwood Shuttle. You will hear from him about the state and moment we are now at, basically, and how we can move forward to a cleaner future. So please join me in welcoming Congressman Jared Huffman.
I had this great line I'd prepared, electrify Marin, but Damon stole it, so hey, it's great to be with all of you. Thanks for having me. Is everybody ready to start the day with some really good news on climate change? Well, then why in God's name did you make me your first keynote speaker? Right? I'm the guy you sent to Washington. I mean, come on. Washington is a place that's been temporarily taken over by the fossil fuel industry and climate deniers and folks who engage in all sorts of generally bad behavior and greed. I've tried having the conversation with my Republican colleagues, about our obligation to future generations. You know what they say back to me? What have future generations ever done for me? That was a laugh line. Thank you. Our president, I'm going to try not to mention his name, when our president was confronted recently with this sobering, indisputable report from the top climate scientists of the world, I said it's no big deal because the climate will just change back. Okay, that's what I'm dealing with. And here's the one I'm really bracing for when I head back to Washington in a couple weeks. We're going to have our first snow of the year pretty soon. Winter's just around the corner. And I guarantee you, as soon as we have that first snow, any memory of the record high temperatures this year, of the worst hurricane season on record, of the diminishing sea ice, of all of the other impacts of climate change is going to be erased. And I'm going to have several colleagues in Congress who take to the House floor with speeches that are mocking the rest of the world and talking about how snow disproves global warming. All right. Meanwhile, when our president is not just making up stories about Democrats recruiting people to a migrant caravan that will soon be bringing drugs and violence to your neighborhood, or any number of other fabrications, he and his administration are doing things that I'm sorry to say are all too real when it comes to environmental policy. So, you know about the Clean Power Plan, which was one of the two real centerpieces of our commitment to the Paris COP21 climate accord. They are in the process, of course, of gutting that, replacing it with a plan that includes no mandates, no specific greenhouse gas reductions, and no deadlines of any kind. The other pillar, of course, to our climate commitment was gradually increasing fuel economy standards. They have suspended that, and they are actively working to try to prevent California and 13 other clean car states from moving forward with setting our own high standards, which we've always been able to do in the past under the Clean Air Act. John Bozell knows that well. The Paris Accord itself, of course, is under threat because the United States is in the process of becoming the only country in the world to withdraw from it. The Clean Water Rule, suspended, in the process of rescinding it. The meager steps that the previous administration was taking to address methane, We had a waste rule, which would have simply charged royalties on all of the methane withdrawn from public lands instead of letting all of the flared and lost methane not count toward those royalties. A nice little economic incentive just not to waste this gas. And then the EPA had a separate methane rule that it had passed for new oil and gas facilities. All of that has been suspended. The administration is refusing to enforce them or actively in the process of replacing those rules. Super pollutants, HFCs, really potent greenhouse gases. Of course, the previous administration had passed a rule to phase them out. The industry was moving to other refrigerants that are safer for the planet, but that was not enough for this administration because the EPA administrator, Scott Pruitt, remember his sweetheart rent deal in Washington? Well, the landlord actually was a lobbyist working to undermine that HFC ban on behalf of some of his clients who didn't want to pay more for refrigerants. And so this administration is in the process of undoing that too. You remember Sally Jewell's moratorium when she was Interior Secretary on any new coal leasing on public lands, and the steps that we had taken to make the Arctic and certain other places off our shores off limits to oil and gas development. This administration has thrown all that out. Of course, they opened the Arctic Refuge to new drilling as part of their tax bill last year, snuck that one in the Senate, and are in the process of opening up millions of acres of public lands to new fossil fuel extraction. And I didn't even mention one of the first things they did, which was to reverse the Obama administration's decisions on Keystone XL and the Dakota Access Pipeline. So the bottom line is, in the past year and a half, this administration has targeted and systematically tried to dismantle just about every federal program or policy that tries to do anything good for the environment, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, or support climate science. And we're fighting back on every single one of these things, and we've actually been able to either block or delay some of the worst of their attacks. But by playing defense instead of offense for the past year and a half, we are losing the one thing we can't afford to lose in the fight against climate change, and that's time. So that's a lot of grim and scary news, which makes me a really weird choice to be your opening speaker, unless you're going for some kind of spooky Halloween theme. Is that the idea? What, was the Marin County coroner unavailable to open this conference? All right. But maybe I can offer a little something positive and uplifting and hopefully inspiring on this subject, because it turns out all the frustrating things that I am fighting against in Washington are just part of the story. They are not the whole picture. There are some powerful countervailing forces at work at the subnational level, pointing the way forward on climate change and sustainability. And while I could give all sorts of examples around the world, I actually think the leadership we're seeing right here in California, and right here in Marin County, and right here at this conference is exactly how we're going to get through this mess. From your speakers and panelists, I took a look at the program, to the dozens of participants I see right here in the room this morning. You are spotlighting actual progress on these issues through innovation and forward-looking leadership in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors. I see local governments all over the country, really, starting to walk the walk. But the County of Marin, I'm so proud of these county supervisors and our County of Marin, because they're at the forefront of that leadership with their Drawdown Marin initiative, with their bold lawsuit against the fossil fuel industry to hold it accountable for its knowing contributions to climate change. And of course, with Marin Clean Energy, which is greening our electricity mix far better and faster than most people thought possible, even just a few years ago. So I know Supervisor Sears is going to talk a little more about those things later today. I'm proud of the Transportation Authority of Marin, and Stephanie Moulton-Peters is here. She helped electrify Marin, Damon, at a ceremony last week when we cut the ribbon on those 2 all-electric buses, all electric, not hybrid electric, not fossil fuel light with natural gas or something like that, all electric public transportation buses. That is pretty cool. We have amazing environmental educators here today, and they're making a big difference in this community and beyond. I know you're going to hear from Cyan Dandridge of Strategic Energy Solutions. I'm so grateful that a few years ago, Cyan and several other passionate parents at Terra Linda High School founded a special school for environmental leadership, the SEL, not a charter school, a school within a school to specialize on developing the environmental leaders of tomorrow, and it's having great success. Carlene Cullen is going to speak to you, and through her Cool the Earth organization that she founded, she has helped instill climate consciousness and environmental responsibility in thousands of children and their parents. That's the way that program works. And now she's focusing on accelerating the transition to clean electric vehicles through Drive Clean Marin, which I'm sure she'll tell you more about. We have businesses at this conference who are doing pioneering work on clean energy and renewables, sustainable pioneers like my friend Jim Happ at LabCon, who is manufacturing with innovative disposable plastics that are unlike anything else anyone in the industry is doing. And finally, I'm glad that you're focusing on agriculture and local food. You know, back in Washington, it's really hard for me to get a bipartisan conversation going around climate change or greenhouse gas reduction. But when we talk about carbon sequestration strategies involving healthy soils and increasing soil productivity, that seems to open the door. And all of a sudden, I have Republican colleagues who seem interested in working together. And the good news is that the Bay Area has many of the top leaders in this field. You're going to hear from Lauren Poncha from Stemple Creek, who is building on the great work by John Wick and Jeff Creek at the Marin Carbon Project. You'll also hear from the great Kat Taylor at Tomcat Ranch about the exciting land management work they're doing. And you also have one of the true legends of the healthy food movement, Mark Squire of Good Earth Natural Foods. His work on local food systems started way back in the summer of love, 1969. So he has been at this for some time. The takeaway that I have from this conference is that local governments, schools, and businesses can dramatically reduce greenhouse gas emissions, that our cars and buses and entire communities really can be powered entirely with clean energy, that local food systems are not only healthier and more sustainable, but they can be part of the answer to climate change. And you are showing that when businesses go green, it's actually good for the bottom line. There's this myth out there that I think is perpetrated by the fossil fuel industry that getting serious about climate change involves sacrifice and austerity and economic stagnation, suffering. You are proving that that's not the case, that it actually is about innovation, job creation, and prosperity. So it actually turns out you don't need a frustrated congressman to come here with good news from Washington, because you are the good news. And I am glad to be here to salute you and to urge you to try to keep it going with as much urgency as ever before. And since the midterm election is exactly 12 days away, I will leave you with one more piece of possibly hopeful news. We have a whole bunch of great environmental candidates who I have been helping and campaigning for all over this country. This blue wave is also going to be a very green wave. And I want you to know that we're going to win many of these races in 12 days, and we're going to flip the House of Representatives. So that is going to make a huge difference. In a Democratic Congress, we are going to shine a bright light on the corruption of the fossil fuel industry that dominates this administration. We are going to start prying the policy agenda away from them. We're still going to need California and our local governments and all of you to continue leading in every way that you can for these next few years while we get things turned around in Washington. But make no mistake, this election is the start of getting our federal government back into the game on climate leadership, so that the next time I speak at this conference, I can actually open with some good news from Washington, more importantly, so we can get to work saving this planet. Thank you for having me.